One of this film's authors first became determined to visit Dunn Vineyards while standing in somebody else's cave. At O'Shaughnessy, high on Howell Mountain, old California bottles rested in the dark like evidence. Somewhere among the library wines was Dunn Cabernet. The question was immediate: where did this famously patient, famously stubborn wine actually come from?
It took years to arrange the pilgrimage. The road climbed toward Angwin through forest and mountain light. We expected to meet one of Napa's legendary winemakers. We found Randy Dunn leaning into a tractor, fixing it. Not a decorative tractor parked beside a tasting room so tourists could briefly cosplay agriculture. Randy was working.
That encounter is the entire Dunn story in miniature. Napa has become exceptionally good at luxury hospitality. Gates, fountains, limestone, and tasting room chairs more expensive than a first automobile. Dunn remains a farm where somebody also happens to make one of America's longest-lived Cabernets.
The winery's own history calls this pocket of Howell Mountain rustic, bordering on industrial and committed to doing things the Dunn way. There is no marble choreography. There are old buildings, tools, hoses, barrels, mountain roads, and work that keeps happening whether or not a visitor has arrived.
Randy did not begin as a luxury wine archetype. At the University of California, Davis, he first studied entomology. Somewhere along the way, Cabernet became more interesting. Although Cabernet also involves phylloxera, mealybugs, and obsessive collectors, so perhaps the career change was smaller than it sounds.
In 1975, he joined Caymus as its first enologist and formative winemaker. This was a different era before the modern-style wars hardened into slogans. The future critic of overripe Napa Cabernet first learned inside one of the valley's emerging stars. Every rebel needs an establishment. Randy helped build his.
Then came the mountain. In 1978, Randy and Lori Dunn bought 14 acres near Angwin. 5 acres of Cabernet were already planted at roughly 2,000 feet. Randy remembered thinking the land was pretty and that he could make good wine there. It was not yet a luxury blueprint. It was remote land, thin soil, low yields, and a bank payment.
The first commercial wine was the 1979 Howell Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon, 669-litre cases, sold through a family newsletter in 1981. The next bottling, Napa Valley Cabernet, arrived in 1982. Same winemaking, different expression, mountain structure beside the softer fruit of the valley floor.
Howell Mountain became an official American viticultural area in 1983, defined above the 1,400-foot fog line. Dunn's vineyards sit higher still, between about 1,800 and 2,100 feet. Below the fog, breakfast. Above the fog, sunlight, wind, shallow volcanic ground, and tannin.
At elevation, Cabernet berries tend to stay small and thick-skinned. More skin relative to juice means more colour, flavour and structural material. Dunn says its mountain yields average roughly half those of the valley floor. Howell Mountain makes Cabernet work for everything it gets. Then the person who buys it may work for another 15 years before opening it.
A young Dunn can feel like a conversation with a beautifully dressed block of granite. You ask, "What fruit should I notice?" The wine replies, "Come back in 2038. You ask, "Could I at least have a hint?" The wine says, "No."
But time changes the argument. Mountain tannin slowly relaxes. Savoury detail, spice, mineral notes and mature fruit emerge. A rough guide might read, 0 to 5 years, tightly coiled, 6 to 10, structure beginning to yield, 10 to 20, complexity arriving, 20 to 35 and beyond. The reason collectors kept the faith. Vintage and storage still matter. Wine has never signed a legally enforceable appointment with deliciousness.
The production is just as uncompromising. Dunn's 2 Cabernets are 100% Cabernet Sauvignon and spend 32 months in new French oak. The lots remain separate, are racked every 6 months, and receive controlled oxygen that gradually finesses the tannin. This is not winemaking by neglect. It is patience with a wrench in its hand.
In 1989, the family dug 6,000 square feet of caves directly into Howell Mountain. The early wines had been made beneath an 1890s stagecoach stop, where temperature could be managed, but humidity could not. The caves hold near 56 degrees Fahrenheit and 98% humidity year-round.
That humidity matters. In a dry cellar, barrels can lose water and concentrate alcohol. In Dunn's caves, long aging can instead reduce alcohol by as much as 1 percentage point without the same water loss. The cave is not merely atmospheric, it helps the wine move toward Randy's most famous line in the sand, below 14% alcohol.
Randy publicly challenged Napa's race toward riper, higher alcohol Cabernet. His complaint was not that pleasure was suspicious, it was that extreme ripeness could erase regional identity, leaving very different vineyards tasting increasingly alike. Randy did not want Cabernet arriving at dinner dressed as port.
In a widely discussed open letter, he urged the industry to reverse the trend. And here, Randy becomes more interesting than the usual traditionalist label. He has been willing to use modern technology, including reverse osmosis, to lower alcohol when needed. His philosophy is not never touch the wine, it is keep touching it until it stops trying to become 15.8%.
Reverse osmosis sounds sinister only because the name is excellent science fiction marketing. A membrane separates part of the wine into streams, allowing alcohol and water to be adjusted before the components are recombined. Used carefully, it is a precision tool. Randy is traditional about the destination, not sentimental about every route used to reach it.
Back in the real cave, the romance returns to barrels, hoses, and work. For 20 years, Randy relied heavily on one cooperage, using half new and half once-used French oak. When Mike Dunn took a larger cellar role in 2002, he began changing the program, not to make the wine fashionable, but to make the oak less obvious.
Today, a vintage may involve as many as 11 cooperages. Mike broadened the tools while protecting the style. That is the family winery paradox. Change too much and you betray the legacy. Change nothing and you turn the winery into a museum. At Dunn, modernization is permitted as long as the Cabernet remains stubborn.
Meeting Mike made that logic feel personal. He was curious, funky, and magnificently uninterested in delivering the standard Napa sales speech. We arrived ready to discuss famous Cabernet. The conversation wandered through bicycles, anthropology, machinery, mountain life, obscure British comic books, and whatever else crossed his mind.
At another estate, someone might gently steer the talk back to the current release and allocation list. At Dunn, nobody appeared assigned to steer anything except Randy's tractor. For Mike, wine did not seem like a product requiring performance. It was part of the landscape, like old equipment and the next fascinating subject.
Mike returned to the family business after years running a bicycle shop in Calistoga. Without formal winemaking training, he reorganized the cellar, experimented with Petite Sirah, and developed ideas he could carry into Dunn. He and his wife, Cara, founded Retro Cellars in 2003.
Retro is the creative counterpoint. Dunn makes disciplined Cabernet. Retro reaches toward Petite Sirah, Zinfandel, Sirah, and less fashionable corners of Napa's history. It is what happens when your family already makes a legendary Cabernet and you decide the world needs more Petite Sirah, a grape famous for responding to gentle extraction with, "We'll see about that."
Parc Muscatine is central to that story. Dunn acquired the historic property in 1991. Old Zinfandel and Petite Sirah there had once gone to ridge. Cuttings from those vines later helped establish Los Abuelos, a 1-acre block planted for retro. The new project grew from the mountain's deep cuts, not from a marketing brainstorm.
The photograph of Mike and Cara therefore belongs beside the retro label, but the brands must stay distinct. Dunn Vineyards is the family Cabernet legacy. Retro Cellars is Mike and Cara's separate exploration. One guards a narrow path. The other happily wanders into the record store after closing.
Succession at Dunn is broader than one father handing keys to one son. Lori built the early sales and shipping operation. Mike reshaped the cellar. Christina, the family's formerly trained winemaker, helped with visits and marketing and often mediates. Alex Dunn now leads Regenerative farming. Ted Kizor has served as official winemaker since 2023. The family story has become a working ecosystem.
Even the vineyards carry family and employee history. JK for daughters Jennifer and Christina, Below House for vineyard manager Raul Martinez, Cuervo for crows that stole the planting markers, Coyote for pups that drank from irrigation lines. This is not branding pasted onto land. It is memory used as a map.
The farming has evolved too. Organic practices began in 2016, and regenerative agriculture now focuses on biodiversity and the health of vineyards within the surrounding forest. Dunn owns and farms 42 Howell Mountain acres. The future of an old-school wine depends on keeping living systems alive, not preserving a sepia photograph of farming.
That is why one of the author's vineyard photos matters. These are not generic rows conjured for atmosphere. They show the mature trunks, the dry mountain ground, the fruit under the canopy, and the woodland edge. The wine's reputation may live in cellars. Its future is exposed to weather.
We first encountered Dunn as a mystery in O'Shaughnessy's cave. Years later, we climbed the mountain to find its source. Randy was leaning into a tractor, fixing it. Mike wanted to discuss almost everything except the famous wine, including obscure British comic books. And there was no polished performance designed to make the work seem more important than it already was.
That is why Dunn feels important. For nearly half a century, the winery has resisted becoming easier to explain, easier to market, and especially easier to drink young. Dunn Cabernet takes the long way around. Apparently, so does a conversation with Mike. If you are patient, both can lead somewhere remarkable.